Good morning. This is House Talk with Wally Kerr. I'm your host, Dave McKay. Wally joins us every Saturday morning at 7 a.m. here on KOKC from your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty Kerr team. Wally, good morning.
Good morning, Dave. How are you this week?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
Doing great. Had a really good week this week and excited to be back here with you today to share real estate knowledge for those who are buying, those who are selling, those who just want to learn more about real estate.
Me, like I said, I pick up some nuggets each week. I'm learning a little bit more. You always told me it's always good for people to be knowledgeable about homes because you always say it's the most important purchase that someone makes in their life. And if you know a little bit more about it, you're better off, right?
Most people, that's where they build wealth, is in home ownership. And boy, a lot of people, as you and I know, over the last 2 or 3 years have built a lot of wealth by owning real estate because values have gone up so much. So it's exciting to help people understand more about things that can make them money in life. I think about the guys from college that got finance degrees. And man, those guys that I know, I mean, they're worth like $1 zillion today, right?
And they want to keep that money.
They understand money.
A great way to do that is.
So if you're going to own a home and understanding more and more about buying and selling, and hopefully we'll help some people do that today, and maybe even with one of our topics today, Dave, maybe save some people a little money.
Give us a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. What are some of our
Really
topics?
Good. So we normally start off our show with just a couple of minutes about what the market's doing, and then we'll move to talking about mortgage insurance today. This is something we've never covered on any of our other shows. Most people kind of knit their eyebrows a little bit when you say mortgage insurance, PMI, MIP. Nobody loves paying for insurance they don't need, so we're going to talk about mortgage insurance today.
Okay.
I brought in some information today, 9 red flags to watch for when choosing a real estate agent. There's some good material there. And then finally, we have a guest, as you know, in today with one of the local home inspection companies, and we're going to ask him to shed a little light on maybe 3 or 4 of the deals that bust a lot of home sales. You know, it's really frustrating, Dave, is when you get a home under contract and then the buyer hires a home inspector, and the home inspector comes and just finds some things that the homeowner didn't know about, unforeseen issues or problems or things that don't work. And in some cases, the buyer walks away. We'll talk to our home inspector, good friend of mine named Fred Stewart today, and I think he'll be able to shed a little light on the home inspection process for us.
Fantastic. So jumping right into it, how is the market this week?
So the only thing that's really changed over the last couple of weeks is the Fed. Once again, Dave, here we go. How many times have we talked about the Fed?
Well, how many weeks have we done the show?
Well, so every week we talk about the Fed and their decisions, and they are still confused as to what they will do on March 21st and 22nd. That's the next meeting of the Fed.
Okay.
The inflation numbers continue to show that there's inflation. You and I know that. Everybody knows that, right?
Yes.
Is anything the same price as it was 3 years ago?
No.
I don't think so. So inflation is still running at a higher clip than what they want. So on March 21st and 22nd, the Fed will decide whether to raise its rate by another 25 or another 50 basis points. So the mortgage companies have to figure this out, okay? If a mortgage company is going to loan money and you buy a home and you're going to close 4 or 5 or 6 weeks down the road, the mortgage company is trying to speculate how much it's going to cost them to give you that money for your home loan 5 or 6 weeks down the road. It's speculation. And I can tell you the mortgage companies don't want to lose.
Sure.
So if they think basis points are going to go up 50, then interest rates will raise a little higher. They already know they're going to go up at least 25 basis points, and that's very clear from the Fed. That's the question right now. Let's make that real simple. If the Fed's raising its rate, Dave, interest rates can't go down. So the market does follow, but it's not a direct correlation on 25 or 50 basis points. Really, the way you just need to think about it is whether they do 25 or whether they do 50, or if they ever did more again, rates are going to go up. So you asked me about the market. My opinion would be if you can buy now and you can find what you want, then I would buy. Why would I not buy if I can find what I want if I know interest rates are going up? And that is the direction the Fed is pushing. And they have said they will have to stay up long term. They're going to stay up for a longer period than maybe what was originally anticipated.
So if you find the house that you want and you want to get into it before the rates continue to go up, now seems like it's the perfect time to do that.
You hit something really interesting. So guess what? For the first time since we started doing our show a few weeks back, the inventory is leveled and it's actually increasing just a little bit.
Okay.
Now, it's still very, very low, but I checked into some of our busiest communities for home sales, Edmond, Yukon, and Norman, and all of those communities are ticking up just a little bit on inventory, which means a few more houses coming on the market and maybe a few less houses selling right now.
Okay, so now we're getting ready to buy, and I've heard this before, didn't really understand what it was exactly, and I think some people get a little bit scared by it or whatever, but mortgage insurance. Tell me why that's important, and how do you go about getting it? Is it like mortgages? Can you shop for mortgage insurance as well and get good rates on that?
Yeah, this is a subject that I think I want to try to keep it as clear as possible.
Okay.
Because mortgage insurance can be confusing. I'm going to answer the second part of your question first.
Okay.
You don't get to choose your mortgage insurance carrier. Your lender does.
Okay.
That's up to the lender. Mortgage insurance is exactly what it says, Dave. Let's make up a scenario today. You're going to buy a $300,000 home, and you're going to put $150,000 down. How much risk is there really for the lender? Not really at all,
Not
right?
really on that, yes.
As a matter of fact, they probably wish you would stop making payments so they could foreclose on your home and have all your equity, right?
Exactly.
But the less money you put down for down payment obviously creates risk for the mortgage company, right?
Yes.
All they own is just the mortgage on the home. So if you stop making payments, they're looking for what are their alternatives. Normally it is they give you some time to make it up, they give you time to reinstate your mortgage, or they foreclose. When they foreclose and you don't make payments, they lose money. So that's why you buy mortgage insurance for a lender, okay? Or if it's a government loan, the insurance actually comes from the federal government. That's one of the misnomers. We're going to talk about conventional loans first today. So the more you put down, the better off you are. Now, I want to start our show off with a trick today. We'll talk about this a little more at the end, but I have helped so many people do this because I learned about this, let's say 15 or 20 years ago, earlier in my career, okay? And that is normally is on a conventional loan, if you don't put 20% down payment and have an 80%, in other words, if it's worth 200, okay, you borrow 200 and you only borrow 160, you've put 20% down, right?
Sure.
What happens if you buy it for 200 and you only put 5% down? So now you got a $200,000 house and you only put 5% down, you're borrowing 190. Again, that's risky for the lender. So normally you have to buy this mortgage insurance and it gets really expensive when you only put 5 or 10% down. So here's one I'm going to launch on you. I'm not sure you and I have ever talked about this, and this may sound foreign. So to avoid mortgage insurance on a conventional, how much money do you need down? 20%.
Okay.
No mortgage insurance. How about if I told you there was a loan called an 80-10-10 loan, which is 10% down, an 80% first mortgage, and a 10% second mortgage. So you take two mortgages on your home. Now, before that sounds scary, let me tell you one of the big benefits. You can't write mortgage insurance off on your tax return as a deduction.
Okay.
It's just insurance. But you can write off home interest, and you can write off home loan interest as a deduction based on your tax bracket on a first mortgage, and you can do it on a second mortgage. So if I want to avoid mortgage insurance, I know I've got to somehow only borrow 80% of my first mortgage. So if I've got 10% down, I could take a 10% second mortgage. 10 plus 10 is 20, and then I'm only borrowing 80% of my first mortgage, and now I'm not paying mortgage insurance. I've got you confused a little bit, so let me let you ask what you're thinking.
So you're saying there's two mortgages. One is 80% of the value.
The purchase for the value.
And the other one's just 10%.
The other one's 10%.
Okay,
right.
It wasn't like you're basically paying for the whole house over again. You're just kind of splitting it up.
You're splitting it up into two mortgages.
So I got that. I was a little confused, but now I'm learning.
No, that's okay. And this is typically a very confusing topic, but people love hearing it because it's a way to get away from paying this expensive mortgage insurance. Might have some listeners right now thinking, I don't have 10% down. Guess what, Dave? There's an 80-15-5 program. 80% first mortgage, 15% second mortgage, and 5% down.
Okay.
The second mortgage carries a little bit higher interest rate, but guess what? The interest is all deductible.
So if I put down 20% or more, there is no mortgage insurance?
That's right. On a conventional loan, there's no mortgage insurance whatsoever.
Okay.
So, Dave, if you only put 5% down, the mortgage insurance is really high. And for our listeners that have taken a 95% loan to value, if it's $400,000 and they only put 5% down, they're borrowing $380,000. And that's a big risk, right? What if something happens to the borrower, gets sick, gets in a car accident, gets transferred out of state, and the market's not good and they can't sell their home? There's a risk there for the lender. The more you put down, the less the mortgage insurance is.
Okay.
So these programs are available where you don't just have to have 20% down or pay mortgage insurance. You can do the second mortgage. Yes, the second mortgage rate is a little higher than the first, typically about 1.5 points, maybe 2 points higher, but it's a much smaller mortgage, right? It's only 10% or 15% of the total purchase price. And the good news is those second mortgages can be paid off with no prepayment penalty.
That's exactly the question I was about to ask you.
Okay, good.
Awesome.
You're thinking ahead.
Yes, because I was thinking, like, can I just pay that off quicker?
Sure. What if a relative that passes away and they leave you some money or a house or some property that can be sold? What if you get a great big bonus from your workplace? What if you get a big tax return? Can you just go in and take that money and put it against that second mortgage that's carrying the little bit higher interest rate and prepay that?
Save some money there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you can pay that off early and you still don't have any mortgage insurance. It would be important, and you brought this up a couple of minutes ago. Can I shop for the mortgage insurance? The answer is no. Can you shop for lenders and ask how much the mortgage insurance is going to be? Yes.
Sure. Okay.
Yes. So you might not just ask a mortgage company, what's the interest rate going to be for me? How much are the fees going to be for me to get this loan? But a third factor might be, tell me how much the mortgage insurance is going to be.
What is that cost to me a month? What could that be?
It depends on the loan amount. And again, it depends on how much you put down. But I can tell you I've seen scenarios on luxury homes, on large homes.
Okay.
Let's say $1 million home, only 10% down. So a $900,000 loan. And I've seen people just go with the first mortgage and not think that doing a second mortgage is what they wanted to do. I've seen those mortgage insurance payments $300-400 per month.
Oh, wow.
So if there's a way to avoid that and be able to take a second mortgage and write the home loan interest off as a deduction on your taxes, just makes a whole lot more sense.
Because that $300-400 is gone right out the window.
Gone, no deduction, just money gone.
See, I learn a little nugget every week. I didn't even know that. So
let's go over again. Those are called 80-10-10 loans.
Yes.
And what does that mean? It means an 80% first mortgage.
Yes, 10% second mortgage.
Right.
10% down.
Perfect. You got it. And what's the 80-15-5?
Okay, 5 down, 15 is the second, and the 80 is the principal on the.
I'll give you some knuckles on that one. You got it. You got it.
Okay.
So these are things that some of our listeners might want to check in on. Tell you what, if you have questions, text me to 330-3000 and just text me the words mortgage insurance, and we can open a conversation. We don't have to talk by phone. You are welcome to call me at 330-3000 right after our show, and we're done here at 8 o'clock every morning.
Yes.
I'll take your call, but if you want to go back and forth on texts and talk about mortgage insurance, just text those words to 330-3000, and I'll help. And let's give our listeners some good news. Not everybody does a conventional loan. The government created, as you know, FHA loans.
Yes.
Okay? And FHA loans were created to help home affordability be easier for those that were lower to middle income and might not have perfect credit. The government passed about 2 weeks ago lower mortgage insurance rates on FHA loans. I'm going to try to reduce it and make it real simple. A couple buying a home today on an FHA loan, if they are buying a $200,000 home, what was passed in legislation 2 or 3 weeks ago that went effective in March of 2023 is that they're going to save about $50 a month on their home payment on a $200,000 home. On a $300,000 home, they're going to save about $75 a month. And on a $400,000 home, this passage of legislation by Congress saves about $100 a month. So that's a brand new FHA guideline. It has to do with the mortgage insurance. On a FHA mortgage, it's not PMI, it's MIP, and we're not going to go too deeply into that today.
Okay.
That gets pretty complicated.
Okay.
But the good news is, first of all, you want to get rid of mortgage insurance. Now, let's close this topic by equating this to the current market.
Okay.
What's happened the last 2 or 3 years with home values?
They've gone up quite a bit.
Way up, right?
Yes.
So to get rid of mortgage insurance, we've kind of decided the mortgage company wants to see that you've got a 20% stake in your home, right?
Yes.
We call that equity, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if you've got a $300,000 home, you're only going to borrow $240,000, no mortgage insurance, right?
Sure.
So if you've bought a home, let's say over the last 5 to 10 years, and the values have gone up this much, you can actually go to your mortgage company and request that the mortgage insurance be removed from the loan if you can show that you've got a 20% stake in your equity. Now, you may not have put 20% down, but what happens when, Dave, most of the homes in the Oklahoma City metro have gone up 25 to 35% in value over the last 3 years.
Yes.
Kind of sounds like a lot of people might have 20% equity in their homes, right? So contact your mortgage company and ask them and just say, my house has gone up a lot in value. I'd like to get this mortgage insurance off. What do I need to do? They're going to make sure you haven't been late on payments over the last 12 to 24 months. That's a typical policy, okay? You can't do this typically if you're refinancing, but the most important factor here is you may need an appraisal, and an appraisal costs about $450 to $500.
Okay.
Well, let's face it. What if your mortgage insurance, Dave, were $130 a month?
Well, after a couple of months, you've paid for it.
Absolutely. So if you think you might have, and we can do this also if you want to text and say, I'd like to find out the value of my home, which is a service we run for our listeners all the time. Text your address to 330-3000, and I receive that. Give me your address on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best. Tell me the approximate condition of your property. And then, if you got a pool or a shop building or you just remodeled the home, let me know that. I'll give you an estimated value for your home. And then by text message, I can compare it with our listeners. Tell me what your balance is on your home. And there's a really good chance a lot of our listeners, I told you I wanted to save them money today.
Yes.
That's where we started today, is we may be able to get the mortgage insurance off of your loan and the payment you're making right now and save you money on your monthly payment based on what's happened in the recent market.
You've been reading my mind this morning because about 2 or 3 minutes ago, that was the question I was going to ask. Is it permanent? Is there a way to remove it? And this started in murky waters for me, and it's gotten to be pretty clear. You explained it very well that I can grasp it now at the beginning. And, I kind of, I call myself, I'm just John Q listener here. We're really good friends. I may know just a little bit here and there about home selling and buying, but let's face it, I'm just kind of like the listener. I'm trying to ingest everything I can to learn as much as I can. And you really kind of cleared that up for me. That was something I really didn't understand.
Yeah, I don't want to talk over anybody's head and make it too difficult.
Yeah.
I did write down a couple of things on my notes this morning.
What you want to do is you want to make something easy to understand that may not sound easy. It may be something that doesn't come across my desk a lot, and it kind of scares me. It was like, oh, if I want to buy a house, now I have to do this and that, and you're kind of taking the fear away, saying this is how you do it, this is how you take care of it, and you've made it really easy to understand.
Okay, good. In my notes, I did want to add that some of these mortgage companies do have what they call a seasoning requirement, and they do require 2 years of payments, many of the mortgage companies, with the mortgage insurance before they will allow you to refi. So you can refinance out. Let's say you put 5% down, you did mortgage insurance. Maybe there's a lot of our listeners that already have this scenario. They can go back and refinance out. Maybe they're in a better equity position now, like we talked about. Their home's gone up in value. Maybe they came across some money, inherited money, sold an asset, whatever it is. You can go back in and refinance and obviously get rid of the mortgage insurance. And a lot of people do that. Okay. But there is typically a cost to refinancing. That's the reason I would first look into, can you drop the mortgage insurance, especially if you got a lower interest rate? Let's face it, rates today are 6.5 to 7 as we're doing our show.
Sure,
what if you've got a 3% interest rate or a 3.5% interest rate from 3 or 4 years ago? You don't really want to get rid of that 3 just to get rid of the mortgage insurance.
Sure.
So you don't want to refi. Let's just call the mortgage company and see if you can get the mortgage insurance off. Okay?
Okay. You're listening to House Talk with Wally Kerr on KOKC this morning. We have a special guest, Wally. We have Fred Stewart with Oklahoma Home Inspection Service. Good morning, Fred. How are you?
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Now, we're going to talk about home inspections, and he's going to delve down into more specifically maybe some of the really details that we need to take care of maybe before selling our home and getting it ready to be inspected and all that good stuff.
Yeah,
there.
let's talk about why that's important, Dave.
Yes.
Is the last thing anybody wants is to either be selling their home and have something come up they didn't know about, and
Yes.
it wrecks the deal. The buyer gets uncomfortable with it. The buyer doesn't like what they see. They cancel the contract. Gosh, what if you're that seller and you've turned around and bought another home? And now all of a sudden you're losing the deal on your property and you're thinking, how long is it going to take to get another buyer? And how are they going to react? Are they going to be concerned that we had inspections done and the buyer backed out? Is that going to send up a red flag
Yes.
for other buyers that might be interested? So I think Fred can share a lot of insight today about some of the things that we can see. Fred, how many inspections would you guess? I have known you for over 30, 35 years.
Yeah. We started in 1985.
Wow. So almost 40 years.
Yeah.
And you've probably done, do you think now you've probably done 10,000 inspections across the metro?
Yeah.
I mean, it would be a huge number.
Probably
wouldn't it?
guess, sure.
Thousands and thousands.
Sure.
So,
Tell me how deep into the inspection you get by checking out all the stuff that I don't see.
Sure. So as a home inspector, we have a code to go by, standards of practice, and that is actually the minimum of what you can always go above the minimum. So we have a minimum standards to inspect all the items, structure, foundation, lot drainage, all of the different categories. So basically, I have a list that we go through,
Okay.
a home inspection list, and we go through, check each item. Usually there's two inspectors with our inspection company. We just feel like, 4 eyes better than 2 eyes.
Sure.
On everything. So that always helps.
Okay.
So, and of course, obviously, Wally and I, when we started, things have changed dramatically over the last 30 to 40 years.
Sure have.
Because when we started home inspections, there was no such things, and it took a while for the realtors to realize that we were actually on their side, and it was really good for them
Yes.
to have home inspections as well as their clients.
So we've seen a lot of things over the years, Fred, that really concern a buyer. One of the things we want to talk about is help our sellers understand today, and the buyers who are listening too, that you're there to discover defects. As far as a seller, it's not like we want any home to come up with defects, but no home is perfect. How about some of the things that you've seen that really cause concern, some of the bigger things, and what you see when you inspect those systems?
Sure. Of course, the first one's always structure in Oklahoma. Again, we have the clay soils, expansive, explodes during rain, shrinks up when it dries. So, of course, then your home's going to tend to move, foundation. And so that's one of the very first things that we look at while going around the house.
Now, is that unusual, Fred? I mean, it's not highly unusual for homes to move in Oklahoma.
It really
is that right?
isn't. It isn't at all. We generally see some movement.
Okay.
Some movement. So it just depends on how much
Sure.
that we're comfortable with when we look at a house and the brick moving and the gaps or cracks that we see in the foundation. So if we see much, basically what I tell them, I go, if I can put my finger in it, then you really need to have a structural engineer take a look at it.
Okay. So sometimes you do recommend other experts to take a look once you've done a general home inspection. And I know your fee is a lot more affordable. Most of the structural engineers that we call are $325 to maybe $550 for an inspection. And that's just for structural.
That's right.
So,
Exactly.
okay. So movement can be normal. And homeowners might be able to see a certain amount of movement just because they have some hairline cracks in their drywall inside the home or see some cracks in their brick. May not be catastrophic, right?
Exactly, right.
Okay.
And so that's what we look for is any gaps or thing that looks maybe more than normal.
I call that settling. It's just the house settling. A lot of times I see that line on the ceiling. It's like, okay, I'm just going to have to repaint that or something like that. Movement is another thing, like you mentioned, because that could cause other issues that are inside the home, whether it's electrical, plumbing, or anything, right?
Well, and movement also entails structure as well. So if you got a roof structure sagging, then obviously there's movement there. So that's what why we say movement, not just settlement. And so most of the roofs that we see are probably okay, but the general problems come when the older homes that had wood shingles, they'll come back and put composition, plywood, triple, quadruple the weight, so then there's more tendency to sag.
Okay, so you're saying that maybe a home that had lighter weight shingles at one point, including wood, and then going back with composition and laying plywood, the weight can actually be distributed. It's just too heavy for the structure of the home. Is that right?
Right. It's never braced properly for composition shingle.
Huh.
It's good to know.
Okay.
So we see that fairly often when they have that switch. And, of course, the roofers, they don't look at that. They don't care. They just, they put the roofing down. That's all they're paid to do.
And a lot of those homes that originally had wood roofs, that was when the wood roofs were more affordable because they're very expensive today. Yeah. Weren't a lot of those homes, Fred, maybe built in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s?
Yes.
Typically, maybe typify that range?
Yeah,
where
really
more
is.
Homes had it because it was more affordable. Is that right?
Yeah,
okay.
It really is.
What are some of the other things that you see? What are the other major mechanical systems that really can be quite expensive to repair or need extensive repairs?
Well, again, heat and air, y'all may have talked about that before. Obviously, the new heat and air systems are not cheap, but we do take a look at those and check heating and air conditioning side of it, see if they're cooling properly. Take a look at the model number, kind of see what year it is. If we're up around 10, 15, then we kind of let the folks know. On one page we have recommendations that aren't necessarily repairs, but we'll put on there your heat and air system is pretty much close to what the recommended
the end of its useful life.
Exactly. So it may be budget for replacement in the near future.
Can you tell when an HVAC system is close to failing?
That's a good question, but no.
Okay.
I mean, all we can look at and say, yes, it's cooling really well and it's really old. That's all we can tell you. And again,
so
it may last a week. It may last another
like a car.
4 years.
I might be able to drive it another 50,000 miles, or it might break down the road. Okay.
Right. So some of the other stuff we may look at is especially ducts that are in the floor. We've had a lot of trouble with water infiltration coming into the ducts, rusting the duct boots. Then you've got a real problem because if that's really bad, then you've got to go with ducts overhead, maybe even replace the system.
I have experience with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a tough one, and that gets quite expensive.
It really does.
I think what you and I have noticed over the years now, Fred, is the cost of heat and air equipment has really skyrocketed because the government is requiring that it's more efficient.
Right.
That it doesn't use as much energy, whether it's natural gas or electricity. So the simple fact that the manufacturers have had to make the equipment more efficient has led to that being more costly to replace those components. Isn't that right?
It really has. The other thing I've noticed, too, more than probably what it used to be, there is quite a variety from like Volkswagen to Cadillac. You can do that with air conditioners, too. You can spend a little or about as much as you want, up to $30,000 per unit.
So are you getting what you pay for? Is that what you're saying?
You really do, yeah. I mean, if you get a higher dollar unit, you get higher SEER, which means cheaper to run the unit.
Okay. Are there any other, big ticket items that can end up costing me on a home that maybe I'm not thinking about?
Obviously, the roof.
Sure.
Shingles, is always going to be a problem. So, some people don't get on shingle or roofs or whatever. I'd say 90% of the time we'll walk a roof. You cannot walk it and expect to find problems with glasses or binoculars or whatever.
Sure.
And not to mention you got fireplaces you got to look at for the most part. But yeah, that would probably, it is obviously a huge ticket item anymore.
Sure.
Again, once we look at it, just like structure, if there's problems, then we recommend a roofer come take a look at it, and he can give you a better breakdown of what's going to need to happen regardless of what insurance says.
This is worth mentioning. So
Yes.
I've got some good friends, Scott and Robin. We sold their home about 3 years ago, and there was a home inspection done, and the home inspector came back and said, looks like the roof is gone. They called a roofing specialist over, and sure enough, they went out and looked and said, yeah, this roof is gone. It's got some major hail damage. The owners determined they weren't home when that hailstorm came through. They called their insurance company, I won't say which one, and they didn't call in time. And they'd hit beyond the period that the insurance company would cover it, which I think was 2 years.
Yes.
They actually had to end up writing a check for that roof out of their own pocket. They didn't know, Dave, that they had roof damage. And then they call their insurance company. The insurance company says, look, if you would have called us within 2 years, we would have covered that claim.
You think you might have some damage? Don't think about it. Have them out and check it out.
It's kind of one of the conclusions we're leading to here today is how do you avoid these showstoppers, these huge expenses once you've budgeted for, I'm going to sell my home for this, I've got to pay my closing costs, I need this down payment for this other home. Most people get down to a number where they say, I really need this amount for my home. And boy, howdy, when somebody's HVAC system has a problem and needs to be replaced, or there's water in the duct boots, or suddenly you end up with a foundation problem. We recently had another couple, Dave in Yukon, and they had bought a home in Edmond and had it under contract. We put their home on the market and placed it under contract very quickly. They knew that they had a few little settlement cracks inside the home, and there was a door or two that didn't shut perfectly.
Oh,
It wasn't square in the door frame. They had a home inspection done, and it turned out they had problems underneath the slab itself, and we're going to have to do this thing called mud jacking or injecting foam.
Yes.
You've heard of that before? They were going to have to inject foam underneath the slab, and the cost was in excess of $10,000.
Wow.
They wish they would have known that before they placed a contract to buy this new home. They lost the new home because they didn't want to do all this foam on their current home, took their home off the market and decided to keep it as a rental.
Okay.
Now, they're back in the market, and we're actually working with them again right now. They would really have liked to have known up front, and we couldn't tell, and they had no belief that they needed foam. Fred, doesn't that require actually drilling through the concrete slab?
Exactly.
Tell us a little bit about that injection
So it really
process.
depends on how big area and how many holes they drill. And so they have a meter, and they start injecting, and you see how high that they need to inject it to get it level with where it should be.
So sometimes the slab actually gets out of level. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So they inject foam underneath. Now, the other, of course, solution, and we all know, is piers.
Sure.
In Oklahoma, foundation piers. But it's expensive, isn't it, Fred?
Usually that's caused by a water leak underneath the house, or maybe even drainage underneath from lot drainage.
Yeah, they were disappointed, and again, I wish we'd known, and they wish they had known, and they did lose the home they wanted. Ultimately, we've got them back in the market, and they found a home they like, but it was unfortunate. And so it'd be nice to know that. We'll talk about that here in a moment. And the last one I want to mention, Fred, is thermopane windows. I've had a lot of problems with those over the years because let's say a home is built and the builder doesn't use absolutely all the highest quality materials and the highest quality windows. They're good windows and they're thermopane, but they don't last forever, do they, Fred?
They really don't. When they first came out, they made very high quality. And then, of course, obviously, the further we went down, the window builders came out and said, well, here, I'll sell you for this. Well, obviously, they couldn't get the same quality. Then it got down to where, okay, they only have to last a year, really, as far as the builder goes.
Wow.
And so the quality really went downhill.
How does someone know if they've got a failed thermopane seal? So a thermopane window is got 2 panes of glass with a dead area.
Vacuum sealed.
Vacuum sealed.
Right.
But these things don't last forever, and I know that. I've been on literally hundreds of inspections with you. I can remember having homes where they had 9, 10, 12, 13, 15 failed window seals, and to replace that window glass was in a range of $2,000 or $3,000, and that's been a few years back. I know that glass is more expensive now.
It really is hard to get, especially in our hail-damaged areas.
So I think, Dave, what we're talking about here is
What is that the condensation, or you might see condensation, or they fog up in between?
Yes,
where
exactly.
something's kind of gone in. Okay.
You know what's interesting? You see these. You know the ones that look like they have little window panes in them, like little individual window panes. We call that a divided light window.
Yes.
And sometimes when you look around those little divided light bars inside that window pane, you'll see little white lines of condensation that are beginning to form very close to those bars.
Yes.
That means it's failed, right, Fred?
Exactly.
And it's early in the game, but the longer that window sits, the more it's going to condensate over time. And I believe, if I'm not incorrect, it's actually lost some of its insulating factor. It's not as energy efficient. Is that right?
It's not, even though there's not a lot there, it's pretty much lost whatever it had.
How do you recognize that? Is it always going to have that condensation or a little bit of residue?
It really is.
So there is residue that it doesn't matter if you're doing this in the winter or summer.
Every window, we'll raise the window, especially so we can see through it.
Sure.
It's pretty easy to see a broken seal.
Okay.
So we talked about, we know structure can be very expensive, and sometimes it can be there and you don't know that you've got structural issues.
Right.
HVAC, some of the things that I had written down just while you were talking was, I know that sometimes you check the temperature differentials. Someone might feel their system is cooling right because they run it and say, well, I've got cool air coming out. But one of the issues you've told me before is, yeah, it's cooling, but it's not cooling like it should, so the unit is running too long to try to pump enough cool air in, so it's costing you more on utility bills, and literally you're wearing your unit out, right, by just running it, trying to get your house cool enough. Is that correct?
Sure.
Other things, like I remember on an inspection years ago, a unit was too small for the house, and one of the reasons was they'd finished off. It was either like a bonus room upstairs or they'd added a room on, but they added space, but they didn't upsize the unit. And so you told me and said the unit's just not sized right for the home.
It really isn't once you start adding on.
You talked about water in the duct boots and how expensive that can be to go overhead. And then give us 30 seconds on what a heat exchanger is and why they crack.
Well, heat exchanger is just the body inside of the furnace. So you have heat going into the house, carbon monoxide going out to the flue. And so if those get overheated after a few years or a number of years, they tend to crack just a little bit. So occasionally, some of those you can actually see with a mirror that are open, some are enclosed. So you have to use a CO2 meter to check and make sure there's not a problem.
Okay, so what happens when there's a cracked heat exchanger on a furnace? Now, is it doing anything dangerous to the family living inside the home?
You pretty much bleed CO2 into the home.
So you're getting carbon monoxide into the home.
Yeah,
with
you really are. So
doesn't sound too good.
So for the most part, they've got to be replaced for the most part, unless it's new. But I haven't seen hardly any new ones. They're generally pretty old to where you can't even get a new one for it. So it's just best to go ahead and replace.
So what I'm hearing is, one of the first steps when I'm thinking about maybe selling our home, one of the first things I want to do is probably get an inspector out there, because if there is additional work that has to be done, I want to take care of that months before I even maybe put it on the market so it's all set to go. If I do that, if I call an inspector and I get it all set up and I do that, and now I want to turn around and sell the home in 6 months, is that inspection good? Do they use that, or does another inspector come in when we're selling the home and does an inspection of it?
I like that question. I wouldn't do that inspection that early. Okay. I would probably do a home inspection in the weeks prior to putting it on the market. The reason I would do that, some people may say, why would I do an inspection now and then have maybe a buyer buy my home and use their own inspector? The truth is, if you do a pre-inspection, you'd like to know if there are major issues. Yeah, the buyer may choose their own home inspector, or another realtor representing the buyer may say, well, I think you should use this inspector over here. But wouldn't you both agree that at least with getting a pre-inspection done, we've identified the big deal killers up front that might bust the deal? We address those issues up front before the home goes on the market. Now you've got a home inspection report that can be posted along with the listing on the property. The buyer can see the inspection, that anything, that was big or serious or, a costly repair has already been handled by the homeowner, and it's not a shocker.
Oh, yeah, I think I agree. And one thing I think most of our customers don't understand is that invariably we will find stuff. We rarely do a home inspection.
Yeah, there's no perfect home, is there, Fred?
Right, because people say, I'll go over a report, and I go, this is a really good report, and they go, you're kidding. And I go, no, it's really good. I only found like a couple of things electrical, a couple of things plumbing. That's actually really good.
And so if you do my home, and there are a couple of these big issues that pop up, do we have a conversation? Are you able to tell me this is what you would recommend? Or can you just say, this has failed and that's as far as I can go? Because maybe I do want to get some things fixed.
Right.
Are you my one-stop shop? Can I lean on you and say, great, I'm so glad you came here and you found these issues so I can fix them. What do I do now? What's my next step in fixing those?
Right. So most of the time it's going to be recommendations like, structural engineer we talked about, roofer. So a lot of the time that's what it's going to be, because they're going to come and tell you actual money and cost of what's going to happen there.
So you'll do the discovery.
Right.
And find the items and give best recommendations.
Right.
And say, you need an HVAC person, you need to get a window man out here, you need to call an appliance person, you need to get somebody to come look at your heat and air. You can make recommendations that's what the homeowner should do next. And at least from me as the broker, the realtor standpoint is now I have an informed customer that knows something that needs to be fixed, and we can take care of that and nip that in the bud before we go put the home on the market and take a chance that a buyer discovers this, changes their mind, and just wants to back out of the deal.
Can we make it real easy if someone has a question about this or wants to get their home pre-inspected? Can they just text you at 330-3000? This is not pre-planned, but of course I'm a genius. Text inspection to 330-3000. We could do that probably, right? 330-3000.
I'm sorry, my mind was still cloudy because I was still going over you being a genius. So, no, I think it's a great idea, Dave. Seriously.
Okay.
Text the word pre-inspection or inspection to 330-3000, and I'll respond as soon as we get done with our show today.
Fantastic. Fred, thank you so much for joining us. And again, if you want to chat with Fred, we're going to give you that information. Just text inspection or pre-inspection to 330-3000. Fred Stewart with Oklahoma Home Inspection Service. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for inviting me.
Once again, you're listening to House Talk with Wally Kerr. I'm your host, Dave McKay, here on 1520 KOKC. Okay, I'm getting ready to sell my home, and I need to look for an agent. We've talked about the housing market the last couple of years has really taken off as far as the home values. A lot of people have a lot of value out there. They're ready to sell these homes. On the other side, here's some people maybe have been around a while, like you. You've been around over 35 years doing this. You
Right.
are a seasoned veteran.
I should be. If I'm not, I need to come over and do radio
true.
with you, and I don't think I'm going to do very
There might
well
be
there.
some newcomers, or there might be some people that thinking maybe this is a way for me to make some money in the short term over a couple of years and want to become an agent. What would be some red flags as far as finding an agent to sell my home?
Okay, I get asked this a lot, and I often visit with people, and they say, I've met this lady at church. We're in a Bible study group together. I really like her. It's between you and her, Wally, and I feel bad saying no to her. Can you help me out with what I might say? I don't want to offend her. She's the nicest person in the world. Maybe it's someone's niece or nephew that's gotten in the business, or an aunt. And what I normally say is, if you would like to use me, tell them you went with experience and felt like experience would matter, whether it's a doctor doing surgeries or it's a CPA or an investment planner. I remember years ago, a young man came to me, and he was the son of one of my friends, and he had just got his securities license, and he wanted to start investing my money. And I really had some hesitation that he would have the experience to make the right decisions and lead me down the right path. So I will tell you, there are a lot of realtors that have gotten into the business and agents. While the market has been very good, it has appeared that real estate was a very easy career to make, big money or money in. The market has changed, and it has changed a lot. 2 years ago, Dave, average days on the market was 3, 4, 5 days for a home. It's well above 3 weeks now for most homes. So it is changing, and agents need experience. So if you're looking for an agent, here's what I would say to your question. What are things that people should know? And according to the National Association of Realtors, would you believe that most people speak to only one agent before they list their home and put it on the market?
Because they like them. They go, okay, this guy will get the job done.
They were nice.
And that's it.
I liked them.
Yeah.
And that's great, but it may not be the wisest decision for selling perhaps the biggest asset that most people buy inside their life.
Sure.
Now, there's people that buy helicopters and airplanes, and that's not me or you. So our biggest assets are the real estate that we own. So 74% of agents across the nation sell less than 5 homes a year. Would you believe that? 74%, according to the National Association of Realtors. How often they choose the agent that sold them the home. So whether that agent is full-time or part-time, all I could say is I know for a fact, doing this 36 years as I have, experience and track record matter. So I would say watch for these 9 red flags.
Okay.
Let's call them 9 red flags, okay? Number 1, if you sit down with an agent and they choose or quote a higher listed price than what you believe sounds realistic, that's a red flag. I have certainly had competed against other agents for a listing before and had a seller tell me and say, well, this other agent, said $280,000, and Wally, you're recommending $260,000. I kind of like the sound of the $280,000.
Sure.
My first response was you can choose whatever price you'd like, and it looks like it's higher than what the comparable sales are, let's go back and look at the research again, and let's look at the demand for your neighborhood. I work in your area, so let's look at the demand. Let's look at how many days these other homes sat on the market and what the result was. And then you tell me, Mr. Seller, what you want to do. If you price a home right, even in today's market, especially at certain price points, you could still get multiple offers and escalation clauses where people are pushing the price higher than the listed price. It's always better to create more demand for your home by putting a more competitive price on and having more people fighting for the home. So price is big. Be careful about an agent who can't back up their data, can't show you comparable sales that support that data. Because remember, Dave, it's got to appraise, right?
Yes.
There's going to be an appraisal done. And what happens if the appraisal comes in low? What happens if it sells for $280 and the appraisal comes in at $260? Well, it's either the seller comes down, the buyer agrees to pay the difference, or it's a bust.
Yes.
And nobody likes to have to go put their home back on the market. Make sure that they back up their research, and there's other questions you would ask also. We talked a little about part-time agents. That'd be red flag number 2. Again, this is typically one of the largest assets that you own, and you probably wouldn't be going to a part-time investment planner or a part-time doctor or a part-time attorney, would you?
No.
You'd want somebody
Not
fully
at all.
immersed
You're right.
with experience and in the market so that they would give you the best possible advice.
Yes.
Number 3, I've heard this a lot over 35 years. Well, I have a friend or I've got a family member that got into real estate.
That's tough.
And I'd like to give them a try. And I think the last time I heard that was maybe 6 months ago when a man said, my nephew just got in real estate and I want to give him a try. And I thought, I think I can bring more to the table for you, and I think I'm a better negotiator, and I've got our guaranteed sale program. Feel free to do whatever you like, but sometimes using family or friends can lead to a friendship broken or an estranged family member if things don't go right.
Do you have to say best of luck for you and I'll be here if you need me?
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
And just say, hey,
no, I always
you want to wish them the best of
want
luck.
to be the nicest guy in the world.
So if they can do something to help out a family member, I mean, that's great. And they help them get their career started. But it's, hey, I'm your safety net. I'm here. When you need me, give me a call.
Oh, in what you do in broadcasting, was there a learning curve for you?
100%.
Now, you're not mixing chemicals here. And you're not making tires in a factory, okay? And you're not doing IT work. Well, maybe you are, part of the time. But there's a certain amount of training in any profession.
Yes.
Real estate involves typically a big sale or a big purchase. There's a lot of mistakes that can be made. I believe experience matters. Be sure you pick an agent that's familiar with the area. That'd be pretty important, wouldn't it?
Sure. Because they're going to know, again, what's the history of the pricing doing in the area? Do homes normally sell above or below? Are there schools? Are there parks? What's very appealing to the area? They're going to know all the ins and outs where someone wouldn't know what's going on.
Right. What am I paying my HOA fees for? What does this cover? What are the covenants or restrictions? Can I put a storage building in my backyard? Can I add on to my home? Can I convert my garage? So these are in the covenants and restrictions, and an agent should always understand everything that there is, including, I think what's most important that we didn't hit there, Dave, was why would someone choose my home over a different home in a different neighborhood, and what is most appealing about this neighborhood?
Sure.
And as the broker, as the realtor, if you're the homeowner, first thing I'm going to turn to you and ask is, what do you like most about your home and your neighborhood? Mm-hmm. Because you know better, you live there. I know the neighborhood from working in it as a real estate professional, but I also expect you to tell me what you think would draw and make a buyer most interested in your home.
Sure.
Agents who don't have a list of buyers that they can exhibit, if you list your home with me today, what are you telling me to do?
Go sell it.
Go find a buyer, right?
Let's go find that buyer.
So if I don't have any buyers, I'm going to turn to you and say, well, let me see if I can go find a buyer, Dave. Wouldn't you rather someone turn to you and say, let me go to the list of buyers I've already got and put your home in front of them first?
That makes me feel very confident.
So I would recommend always asking an agent, do they have a list of buyers for your home? When we meet with sellers, Dave, I've got buyers for every neighborhood, for every city inside the metro, not each individual neighborhood necessarily, but for each city area at different price points. I've got 787 buyers right now active in my database, looking every day. For 10, 15 years, I've said Wally has the buyers.
Yes.
And it's because we do so much Google advertising and so many programs that bring people to us. Now a lot of them are just looking for the perfect home. So if you've got a home that you want to sell, boy, before you put it on the market, please just text me or call me at 330-3000 and let's talk about the home you're planning to sell. Let's hit these other points really fast here.
Now,
Number six. Agents who can't show you why you should list with them. It's not just put a sign in the yard and put it in the MLS and hold an open house.
Yeah.
For us, our guaranteed sale program is a great benefit for our sellers because I'll go buy someone else's home so they can buy our seller's home.
Yep.
And I'm the only one inside the metro that runs that program as effectively as what we do. Number 7, agents too who don't offer a cancellation guarantee. I certainly hear stories, and maybe you've heard one or two in the past. Somebody signs an agreement with a realtor and they feel locked in.
That's not a good feeling.
Especially if you get into a 4 or 6 month agreement and don't feel like they were the right agent.
Yes.
So we give a cancellation guarantee that says we will keep our promises, great communication, everything we tell you is honest promises, what we show you is true, and you've got a cancellation guarantee that if you're not happy with the service we're providing, that they can cancel their listing with us prior to accepting a contract for their home.
And I've seen that with a friend who didn't go with Wally Kerr, and they didn't like it. They were told this is going to be a hot property and it's going to sell, and it was extremely frustrating. Another home that they were getting ready to move into, the timelines were starting to grow apart, and boy, they had a bad experience with that.
I'm sorry to hear that because we work so hard to get that 5-star review.
Yes.
My reviews at Google, which I hope listeners will look and do research at Google and Zillow, we're very prideful about the reviews we've got. So the cancellation guarantee for us is a no-brainer.
Great.
Number 8 on our list, an agent who doesn't have a full-time marketing staff. Dave, real estate is marketing.
Yes.
Creating demand for a home. Do you want one buyer for your home or do you want 13 buyers?
I want 13 because I want them to start bidding.
That's
I want
marketing.
them to all fall in love with it.
That's marketing.
Yes.
Got to drive great demand for your home. We have a full-time marketing department. Allie and Garrett work full-time on my team, and that's all they do is market our properties for sale.
Wow.
And then finally, I think the big one is, we hear this a lot. Wally, will you sell my home for a discounted fee? I found this agent or this newer agent that will sell it for less. First of all, I'd say that agent may not be a great negotiator. And if I'm going to negotiate the best price and best terms for you on your home, Dave, you need somebody that's got good negotiating skills.
Yes.
In a lot of cases, I can go back and negotiate for enough to pay the fee or to earn the fee that you pay me, and you get that much more for your home. So discount brokers, if they're not earning much on selling that home, are they really going to spend a whole lot of marketing dollars to promote that property?
They're not invested on it. How invested are they in selling your home versus if they have maybe 2 or 3 other ones they're selling? Are they spending more time on those than mine? Is mine not getting their full attention?
And that's a very valid question. We have a free report called 10 Questions You Must Ask an Agent Before Hiring Them to Sell Your Home. If any of our listeners would like to text me at 330-3000 and just type in 10 questions, I'll need your address of where to send the report. So if you'll text just the words 10 questions, which means I'd like the free report, 10 questions that you should ask any agent before you list your home with them. I'll send you that report. I'll just need your address. Your name would be nice so I'll know who I'm sending it to. But just text me, and I won't call you. And I'll take the address and I'll drop that in the mail on Monday when I'm back at the office.
Fantastic. This is House Talk with Wally Kerr. It airs right here on KOKC every Saturday morning at 7 a.m. If you're thinking of making a move, you can text or call Wally at 405-330-3000 with the words, I want to sell. That's 330-3000. Text the words, I want to sell. Or you can just visit wallyhasthebuyers.com and get an estimated value for your home by texting your address, again, to 330-3000. You want to include the condition of your home, right? Basically 1 through 10 or so, and just say, hey, I think it's an 8.
Yeah, give me an idea on condition, and certainly if you've got a pool, a shop building, if you're newly remodeled, tell me that. Text that to 330-3000. You'll get an estimated value from me and no phone call.
You can hear replays of this show on Wally's YouTube channel, on his website, wallytalk.com. housetalkshouses.com, or listen to the podcast platforms like Spotify, Podchaser, iHeartRadio, and again, soon you're going to be on the biggie, Apple Podcasts. Coming
Working
to
on
Apple
that now.
Podcasts. All right. Thanks for listening today. Join us again next Saturday morning at 7 a.m. This is House Talk with Wally Kerr. I'm your host, Dave McKay, on KOKC.